campuses for diversity. I think they see it as a political winner for them to stoke racial fear, and I think it's an issue that we're still grappling with and figuring out how to fight back on.
I know that you gave a quick introduction. For people who are new to the area, we don't know which name of those names went with which people or who they represent. So could we ask?
So what we'll do is just introduce ourselves
and tell us who you represent before you start answering.
Joe Bolton, Iowa City, Iowa Senate.
Christina Bohannon, Iowa City.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dave Jacoby, State Representative from Coralville. And you mentioned Senator Chapman in your question. I won't make any comments on persons or personality, but I will say that our county supervisor may have been correct in his assessment of Senator Chapman. And you can look up John Green's tweets, and he's not totally wrong. Here's the problem I see. He throws something out like this that I think is amazingly stupid. And the likelihood of something like that passing may be slim. But I have relatives across the country who see it. And they see that and they think this is what Iowa is. My nieces and nephews go, this is Iowa. In fact, my nephew who graduated from Iowa State is in California working as a civil engineer. Said I'd kind of be interested, Uncle Dave, in moving back to Iowa. He's the first one that sent me a tweet, or I'm not very good at social media, something on my phone that I could read, and said, if this is Iowa, Uncle Dave, I really don't want to move back. If we're talking about book burning, if we're talking about restricting what we're teaching young people, then we're meeting here, Joe and I will be, Senator Bolton and I will be meeting in 2 days at a tax expenditure committee. We're going to talk about teacher shortage, worker shortages. Well, I can tell you why there's a shortage. Number one, there's not enough people in Iowa. And number two, because we send messages like that. And that's not the message we want to send from our education community.
And I'm State Representative Mary Masher, and thanks everybody for sponsoring this, and then all of you for coming tonight. We do appreciate it. I'll start by saying I taught for 33 years in the Iowa City schools, and I'm very proud of that. Never did we have any restrictions on teaching facts and history. And so when I look at what Senator Chapman has said, I understand that we have freedom of speech in this country, right? So he's allowed to say whatever he wants. It doesn't mean it will happen. We do have extremists in the House as well. I'm not going to deny that or make you believe that there aren't folks in the House who would also echo that and believe it as well. What I think will happen is reason will prevail, and we will not see legislation like that pass, but it does create enormous problems for educators, because now they are put into a position where they are being scrutinized by the public in ways they have never been scrutinized before. This last school board election, if you looked at what happened across the state of Iowa with school boards, that should cause people to pay attention and to get involved and vote, and to make sure that people do have folks representing them that also echo their beliefs and their philosophies. But to me, it's really important that we encourage teachers and let them know that we trust them to make the classroom decisions they need to make in order to teach our students. And I think that's critical in terms of anything that we do, is sending that message to them. And again, I am worried about the teacher shortage and the fact that people are deciding not to go into education. And many of the students that are being educated here in Iowa are leaving the state because of comments like Senator Chapman's. And that's very bothersome to me as well, because we need those people. We need them in our schools, and we need them teaching in Iowa.
Thank you all for those responses. Moving on to more higher education focused question. Iowa's Board of Regents, which governs the state's public university, received no increase in appropriations last year following a cut of $8 million the previous year. So do you anticipate seeing, or what do you anticipate seeing proposed for funding this year, and how should the legislature address university funding?
So I'm gonna start. Barb Wilson is our new president for the University of Iowa, and she has been making inroads and meeting with legislators across the state, both from the Senate and the House, in terms of meeting on their home turf and being able to talk to them about the value and the importance of the University of Iowa to the economic livelihood of this state. And so I think that is going to bode well, and I think that's really important in terms of her job and her position in terms of being able to advocate for this institution. She can't do it alone, and all of us need to be making that same pitch and helping others understand what an economic engine this university is for the state. Many years ago, we had a study done, and it was a $6 billion impact. This is probably more than 6 or 7 years ago now, that the University of Iowa alone had, let alone Iowa State and UNI, on the economy of the state. There are 13 surrounding counties. The University of Iowa is the #1 employer in those counties. So there should be some connecting of dots in terms of why this institution is so important, not only to the people who live here, but surrounding counties as well. And then all of the services they provide to small towns, the ag community, all of those kinds of programs that they support in terms of in those local areas. So I think they have a vital role, and it's our responsibility to not only echo that. We have not had increases. It's been since the Democrats were in charge that I think you've actually seen real increases to the University of Iowa in their budget. And add to it, we used to have a salary bill. So in addition to increasing the general fund for the university, we actually had a salary bill that increased funding as well. And if we're going to keep and attract good faculty and staff, that's extremely critical in being able to maintain the quality that we have here.
I'm actually a little optimistic. I'm optimistic because it's an election year, and I think there'll be some bipartisan work to reinstate the 7 or 8 million. Now, on the negative side, that's nowhere near where we should be. What I think you'll really see this year is a little tug of war between our federal funding and our state funding. And there's different strings attached to every tax dollar, as there should be. But the university relies heavily on federal grant programs, and we see more money coming from the federal government than we do from the state government. That's not the way it should be. We should be matching it. But I think it's important for people to keep an eye on those discussions between both those funding streams. And it's very important that we hear from the students, because students are from every county in Iowa and from other states. And it's important that your voice is heard in Des Moines, because people really care what you think. And especially if you get other people in your home counties or home state to say, hey, she or he is at Iowa, they're thinking about staying. Or he or she is at Iowa, and we hope to get them back to Rockwell City. Well, maybe not Rockwell City. I just threw that out there because my wife's from there. Give her a lot of guff coming from a small town. But we want to keep and recruit young people in our state, and I think that's where you have a power in your explaining your situation to us in Des Moines.
Well, let me start by saying thanks to the DI team that's here tonight, who are student journalists who are making this forum possible. Thanks for bringing us together. I share the optimism of my colleagues a little bit that we've been in such a bad place that, geez, it's got to get better at some point. I was trying to think, Representative Masher noted that the last time the universities, all three of them got an increase was, I believe, in 2016, which was the last year Democrats were in charge. So we've had, not to be super partisan, but the Republican priorities are different. Their economic policies and tax policies are different than ours. They're more than happy cutting taxes for millionaires in Des Moines than they are making sure students and their families can afford to come to these institutions. So when the state doesn't fund our public universities, we turn to the families and students to do so. And I think if you look at the university's budgets over, and you and I might be more like this, but Iowa State and Iowa have been more like this, right? So year over year since 2017, the revenues have gone up here, but they've come out of the pockets of students. And 25 to 30% of the kids on our campuses today are first generation kids. And those kids and their families need affordability, and they need grants, and they need financial support and other supports when they do get here to be successful. And we're just, I think, short-circuiting our future if we do not invest in every family and every youngster that wants to come here. I think in the Senate, we have a little bit more favorable, a few members that are more favorable to higher education funding. Senator Knoyer from Scott County has a daughter, I believe, at Iowa State, a son here. She kind of gets it because she's got kids here. And she really worked hard to try and get an appropriation this year. And on the very last night, somewhere in the middle of the night, Pat Grassley, the House Speaker, took $8 million away from the program. Everybody's like, we're gonna get it, then it was vanished. So I think it was her first year leading that committee. I think she learned something from that process, and is gonna go fight come next spring for a decent appropriation. And I think there's a feeling like we might get back on track in 2022.
So I would agree with that. I'm a little optimistic as well. Like Joe said, I don't know if we can get much worse in that regard. So I certainly hope that this is the year. Just to echo, I really appreciate everything that my colleagues said, because I really agree with it. But just a couple more things. I was the first in my family to go to college. Neither of my parents graduated high school, and public education was everything to me. I mean, from kindergarten all the way through, high school, and then engineering school and law school. All of that I did completely public education, and tuition at a major college, and I went to the major university. I went to sort of the University of Iowa of Florida, right? The University of Florida. Tuition now is 6 times what it was when I went to college. So if you look at University of Iowa's tuition now compared to when I went to college, where I went to college, it's 6 times what it was. That is really terrifying to me, because I worry about what happens to those first generation kids like I was. I don't know today if I would have been able to go to college, if I would have been able to afford that. And that is how we lift people up. I mean, that is, education is the rising tide that lifts all boats, whether it's K through 12 education, preschool, or whether it's universities. And so I think that it's really an equity issue. And it's an issue about our democracy. I mean, do we want people to be educated? Do we want them to have an education? Do we want them to be able to better themselves? They have to do it themselves. They have to do the work themselves, but we have to give them that opportunity, and it has to be accessible. And at this point, as we've seen, I mean, just in time, the 22 years I've been here, the tuition has just gone up and up and up. And like someone said, it's just the students now that are bearing all of that, rather than the state providing that appropriation. And so, it's something that I am very, very concerned about when I look around and I see our students. And I'm a professor at the University of Iowa Law School. I see student debt is doubling and tripling what it was just in the time that I got here. That really saddles people with a lot of debt as they go out to start their lives, and it forces them to make choices about their careers that they wouldn't otherwise. And so, for example, all of these things are connected, because we have people who would like to stay in Iowa, who would like to work in small towns, who can't do that because they can't earn enough in those small towns to pay for the debt that they have from the university. And so we talk about our workforce issues, right? And a shortage here in Iowa. Well, people can't afford to stay here because the salaries are lower and their debt is so much higher. So, you know, that everything is connected, and we need to really think about the role that our universities play in that, and the role of that rising tuition and so on, and the lack of support. The other thing is, as I think Mary said, you know, when I was on faculty senate several years ago, I remember there was some data showing that for every dollar invested in the universities, we got the state economy benefited by something like $8 to $10. That is an incredible investment. I would like to find any other investment that rivals that kind of eightfold investment. And so, you know, when we look at what's happening in the state, you know, in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurial activity, startups, those kinds of things, a lot of those things start at the University of Iowa or at Iowa State. And so, you know, those are all things that really drive our economy, and it starts right here at our universities. And the last thing that I'll say is we educate nurses, doctors, dentists, lawyers. All of those are things that we have shortages of in our smaller towns and rural areas. And when every legislative session, we talk about that. We talk about the problems of having those kind of professionals to care for people in the small towns and in the rural areas. But we're not investing in training those same people who might stay here. You know, and so we need to think about the central role that our universities play in all of these myriad issues that we see and we face every time in the legislative session, and we need to invest in our universities and give them the resources they need to better the state, because that's really what we want to do.
And I just wanted to add, we have almost $1 billion surplus in the state budget right now. And so wouldn't you think that you would want to invest in education? You would want to invest in early childhood education opportunities, healthcare. We have a shortage of social workers and counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists in the state of Iowa. Providing more incentives for people to go into those fields would make a lot of sense, right? But we're not doing that. Instead, they're looking at tax cuts. So Joe and Dave are going to be heading to Des Moines and having that discussion about which tax cuts we should be looking at. So it's not a lack of money. We have dollars and we have money available to invest in priorities that we believe in. They have a different set of priorities. Let's just be honest about that.
Thank you guys for those response. Another issue affecting college students. Earlier this semester, University of Iowa students protested against alleged sexual assault at the Iowa Phi Gamma Delta House. The University of Iowa's anti-violence plan suggests convening a summit, including state legislators, to introduce prevention education at middle and high school levels. So what should the Iowa legislature do to strengthen sexual assault education and prevention? Big question. I don't know. Do you want to start, Representative Bohannon, as a University of Iowa professor? I know it's a big question.
I'm happy to start. I think, you know, whatever evidence-based practice experts tell us to do, whether it's programming for junior high kids about relationships, or, you know, I think, I mean, we're open, we are open to anything. When you say, what is the legislature going to do? I think that's probably a different question, because the Republicans are in charge and we do what they want to do. But I think we should take any advice we get on how to reduce sexual assaults. If there's policy we need to do, if there's things we need to do at school before kids get to college campuses, we should do it. This is an enormous problem. It's not just here, it's on every campus in the state. We have private colleges and public universities and community colleges. And it's an enormous issue, and I think we should work all together on it, including young men.
I think that protest was born from a frustration that is accurate. My youngest daughter is friends of a person we might be talking about. I've heard more about this case than many people have. But the larger picture is, the problem with what we tend to do, and we do it in institutionalized areas, is we always set up, they say, well, don't worry, she can get help. Well, we're focusing on getting help for a young woman after this shit goes down. We should be focusing up front so stuff like this does not happen. And we need to make sure that people who are offenders are prosecuted or are led out of our universities. I'm tired of saying, well, did she get help? I don't want to see help for, well, I do want to see help for her. I want to make sure that the offenders or people that have affected people's lives are paying the price for what they've done too. So I don't think the damage to the Fiji or unnamed house after those protests was the wise thing to do, but I do see why a group of people, local people, were frustrated over how slow the process can move and who the focus of the attention was on. Sorry about that, can you tell I'm a father of daughters?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So I was gonna mention bystander training. I think there needs to be more of that on campus and in our middle schools and junior highs and high schools, so students understand they have a responsibility if they are present and are seeing things happening that shouldn't be. And holding people accountable for that, because I think right now, students oftentimes don't know what to do. And as a result, there's this code of silence. The drinking and the sexual assault issues have been on this campus for quite some time. This is not new, and we've been seeing that over time. It's not as if that has changed. We aren't making the inroads that we need to. And I think the Greek system needs to be looked at. I think we need to be honest about that in terms of what is happening there and how are they holding each other accountable for that kind of behavior. Because it isn't acceptable. We should be seeing some of those fraternities kicked off campus and sororities if we're seeing any problems there. But that whole lack of having anyone in charge in those houses, and I think one of the recommendations from President Wilson was to have more adult leadership in those homes, in those Greek houses, so that there can be individuals that are monitoring what is going on there. Because I think there is a culture that is happening that starts in middle school, junior high, high school, and they bring that to campus. And we certainly are not addressing it in the way we should. So I'm hoping we'll be doing more of that.
So I agree about the bystander training and definitely about having more adult supervision. I think that those are really good things. You know, the one thing I will say, and so much more needs to be done here, but I will say that I do think we have made progress, and I know that it's hard to see that when there's an issue like this. It's just so hard to see because, you know, what's happened is can be pretty terrible. But I teach a class called torts in law school to first-year law students, and in that class, one of the things I teach is assault, the tort of assault, including sexual assault, and we talk about consent. And I have taught that class now for, I think, 22 years, so I've taught about 22 times. And there's this example that I use in the class, this hypothetical. Lawyers, we like to do lots of hypotheticals. And I have used the same problem for about 15 years now, and it has to do with what constitutes consent. And I won't go into the whole details, but I'll just say in it, there's a woman who is very ambivalent about whether she's consenting to a sexual contact. And I continue to use this problem, even though I usually change up my problems every year, because I like to see what's happened over time. And in that period of time, in that 15 years, we went from a period where probably 90% of my students thought that there was consent, even though this woman had shown and said things that indicated she did not consent, and then eventually sort of resigned and gave up. And 90% thought there was consent then, and now it's almost exactly the opposite. I would say now there's about 90% who think it is not consent. And these are young people. These are early 20-something people. And so, you know, I think that we are seeing progress. We are a long way from being done. I think, we still have a lot of work to do. We're seeing a lot of new trainings that are, I think, pretty good. The bystanders, I do this myself at the university. I go through the sexual assault trainings, including the more recent edition of the bystander training, which I think is very good. So there's a lot more that we can do, and we can invest in that. But we have made some progress, and I look forward to continuing that work and continuing that progress.
Yeah, thank you guys. That is a pretty loaded question, but it's great to be able to hear you guys talk about it. In the special session that happened just a little while ago, the legislature passed a bill with bipartisan support, defining medical and religious exemptions from the vaccine and expanded state unemployment benefits. Democrats did not vote uniformly on this, and why did you guys each individually decide to either support or not support this bill, and what are the next steps in addressing the pandemic up in the State House?
I don't even know how people voted. I know how I voted, but I don't know how people voted.
I do have the breakdown if you guys want that.
I know how I voted.
I'll learn tonight.
Yeah,
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I was a hell of a no. The bill, in my eyes, was absolutely awful. What you're doing is legalizing worker misconduct. And by legalizing worker misconduct, it means for this particular narrow issue that people can collect unemployment insurance. Now what that does is it takes money from our unemployment funds that are set aside for workers affected by plant closings and by being terminated for, not misconduct, but terminated because there's a reduction in the workforce. Those are actual IWD terms used for unemployment. What it also did, it was a bill that was a slap in the face of President Biden. President Biden is trying to take steps to curb this pandemic, and this bill was nothing but a slap in the face of people who are supporting the government. Now, if we're gonna have it and here's what's interesting, the businesses were against the bill. The Chamber of Commerce, couple other groups had come to me and said, we don't like this. It's government intrusion telling us what we need to do with our employees to make sure that we can keep the doors open. And this is not just healthcare professionals. This is not just the healthcare professions, but also think of a meat packing plant that's just south of here. What that does is it opens the door saying, you don't have to get a vaccine. We know double-digit people die from the COVID virus, but we're gonna keep them coming to work, and we'll worry about mitigating COVID at a later date. So I was a no on that particular bill.
And I was a no as well, and I was a no because they weren't able to show us or tell us what impact it would have on the unemployment compensation fund. And obviously, they were telling employers, you don't have to pay anything more, but the fund is basically self-funded in that everybody will pay more who contributes to that fund because the money has to come from somewhere. And they were not able to show us at all where the money was going to come from, and then the fact that the rates would have to increase for all employers, which is one of the reasons why a number of businesses were opposed. And obviously we're concerned about the fact that it sets a terrible precedent. What's going to be the next issue that you're going to decide we're going to set a special category aside for and allow people to take that unemployment for this reason? What next? And so I look at that and think there's a reason we have that fund. It works well for the people who need it, and to use it for that purpose did not make sense for me. And that's why I voted no. They couldn't even show us what kind of an impact it would have on the fund. There was no one that spoke in favor of it in the committee. When we had the subcommittee of a whole and the committee, we allow the public to come and speak. No one spoke in favor of this bill. Interesting. The anti-vaxxers were opposed because it didn't go far enough. And the folks on the employer side were concerned about the effect on the fund as well.
Yeah, it was a weird bill, weird day. I mean, we saw the language, the bill was, we showed up at 10 o'clock, this bill, I think we saw it by 11 o'clock. Nobody saw it in the lobby, the business community hadn't seen it. And this was the second special session this year. And at both, there were probably 400 anti-vaxxers unmasked in the building, yelling and chanting. And these are folks that want to get rid of the requirement for polio vaccinations and smallpox vaccinations and chickenpox. It's like a dozen vaccinations you have to go to kindergarten and daycare. And that's their goal. And when the pandemic arrived, they found all these travelers that were more than happy to join them. So they had just like a heyday of organizing people that don't want to get vaccinated. Today in Iowa, 53.5%, 53.5% of Iowans are vaccinated. I think the president's proposal to require larger employers to vaccinate is rational, right? If we're going to have 40% of American people or Iowans unvaccinated, this pandemic is not going to go away. We're going to have our own variants here in Iowa. And so, I think people voted either way on this because it was a goofy bill. We knew it was going to pass. I think the more concerning part is that Republicans have kind of taken the side of COVID. They see it as a political issue next year to try and beat Democrats with, saying that it's still out of control. You said you were going to snuff it out. It's not happened. And the messaging from our governor has just been crazy. I mean, we've got 750 people in the hospital today, another 100 deaths. We've had 100 deaths a week for the last 3 months. And it's out of control. We are all wearing masks in this library tonight. I've been to hundreds of meetings in this room. It's the first time I've had to wear a mask. And I guarantee you, probably every time I come back here in the near future, I'm going to have a mask. And so we got to either have some rational policies and some good leadership. We're not getting it from Governor Reynolds. She's moved on. They've kind of given up, really. I mean, it's kind of a cycle of life or something. You're going to die of something. Maybe it's going to be COVID. Deal with it. And that's the policy. I was a no. I could have gone either way, but in the unemployment stuff, we're the only state in the country now that says you get automatic unemployment if your employer fires you because you will refuse to get vaccinated, which is really an interesting place to be. The religious exemption was you can worship anything, and the health, if you had a health concern, you go, I think I might get a headache if I get the shot, so I'm not getting the shot. There's no medical exemption from a doctor. And there's not a single religion in Iowa that says they're against the vaccines. So it's crazy land, and it's hurting our workforce. It's hurting our hospitals are just bonkers. And if stay well, my friends, because you do not want to go to the hospital right now. There's nobody there. The people there they're going to take care of you are wiped out, whether you got COVID or anything else. So we're just in a place, and we'll probably see more of this stuff. The anti-vaxxers at like 11 a.m. on the morning we were there were chanting at the top of their voice, kill the bill. Bill we passed. They passed. Kill the bill because it did not go far enough. So it's going to be a circus when we return in January. The major employers and the powerful business interests got run over by these anti-vaxxers, and it'll be interesting to see if they can fight them off in 2022.
So, I think the reason that you saw some bipartisan support and Democrats being split on it is because when you look at the bill, there were, they have this religious exemption and this medical exemption. And so, there are people who may have genuine beliefs about, they think that something bad is going to happen to them. I think a lot of it is misinformation, frankly. But I think that a lot of people have that genuine belief. They may have, a religious belief. They may have a belief that it's going to hurt them medically. A lot of people have some kind of underlying condition, and they're worried about what the vaccine will do. Again, there's a lot of misinformation out there. But I think that if someone had that genuine belief, then what this bill does is it says that if you refuse to get the vaccine, you can get unemployment benefits because you have that, that belief. Now, the employer is not precluded from requiring the vaccine under this bill. It doesn't say that a business can't require it. It says that if a business requires it and a person refuses to get it, then they can refuse to get it and then get unemployment benefits. So, I think that it is interesting that, the protesting group, they didn't like the bill because it didn't go far enough, because they wanted businesses to, they wanted to be able to prohibit businesses from requiring the vaccine altogether. And this bill was seen as sort of a compromise of a kind that said that the state isn't telling businesses they can't require it, but it does say that if someone has a belief and exercises that right and that belief, that they can get unemployment benefits. So, I think that people were just split on that. I think that there were Democrats who were concerned about the civil rights aspect of it, that if people had a genuine belief that they thought something bad was going to happen to them with the vaccine, that they could, refuse to do that and get unemployment. I think it's one of these that reasonable minds can differ, and will we see more of this? I don't know. I think it's a really tough issue right now. I know a lot of people who do have deeply felt feelings about the vaccine. And again, there is a lot of misinformation out there. And so, I worry about that, and I worry about them and their health and, where this is all going. But I think that's what you saw with the bill.
Yeah, thank you guys. So we're gonna kind of cut it there for our questions, but now we're gonna give everyone a chance to kind of come up, or am I good? Okay, I think I'm gonna go through, and if anyone has a question, you can stand up, and this is that time to ask that, and then we'll go through those and see how much time we have left, and we'll ask a couple more, but I think we might just stick with the audience questions, so let's hope you guys have some good ones.
We need a break from the journalists.
Yeah, you guys are tough on us.
Do I have any people that want to go first?
Hi, is it on here? Can you hear me?
You can.
Hi, my name is Mason Donaldson. Thank you for all coming and showing us all, hear what you have to say. My question concerns climate change. I was just wondering, what has the state done in the past to sort of help and fix this problem, and what do you think we could do in the future to do our part as a state to help solve this problem?
You said the journalist questions were hard.
Now look at the time.
I mean, not to make this partisan, but I mean, Democrats have done a bunch of stuff before we lost control. Like a decade ago, we created this Climate Change Advisory Council, with all these recommendations for what the state should do to prepare across all these areas. Jerry Schnorr, faculty member here, led that effort for almost 2 years. None of those recommendations, when Republicans came in control and Branstad got elected, none of that stuff went forward. We created the Iowa Flood Center. Democrats created the Iowa Flood Center, which is probably the most significant investment in adaptation, helping communities deal with these incredible floods we've had since 2008 until the present. They continue to function and do really good work. The governor and Republicans gutted our energy efficiency programs. We had some of the best energy efficiency programs in the country. For the last 30 years, they took about $100 million out of programs that help homeowners and businesses save energy. I mean, that's the best thing we can do, is not burn coal in the first place by doing things more efficiently. And so they haven't done much. We haven't been able to really do much on ag-related kinds of climate issues. So I'm not, we've had this, it's a hoax, we've had a lot of denial, and not very much action. And we have maybe one debate a session where somebody gets up and says, why aren't you guys, we need to do more about this, and then we all sit down and move on to the next thing. But the administration has no plans on this. We do have this last 6 months, this carbon sequestration task force to figure out how to pump carbon that's created when we make ethanol into a pipeline and ship it over to North Dakota and stick it in the ground. I think that's the latest. I think that's and that's something, but it's like, we probably need to transition away from ethanol. We don't have, corn crop goes into gas tanks. We probably need to, somebody at some point is going to shake their head and wonder why we did that. But that's where we're at this point. It's an effort to keep ethanol going, obviously, by making it a little greener, by creating this hazardous waste, this hazardous pipeline that'll be. So, not much. I'm not optimistic. I mean, this crew, they have the so-called trifecta, and we have an election coming up next year. I hope that, Mason, you and others press these politicians for what their plans are, because we have so much work to do.
So Mason, I was gonna start by something really positive. When Democrats were in control, one of the things that we did was set up funding for renewable energy. So solar and wind in Iowa have really taken off. Solar alone is over 6,000 jobs in Iowa, and that's increasing, and obviously there's a market there. We have a lot of sun, and we can utilize that sun. We have more wind than most other states that have wind energy as well, but we have made a real commitment to that, and so has Mid-America and Alliant in terms of putting up those wind towers. And many of you drive 80 and see all of those wind parks going up across the country. But again, we made those commitments probably 20, 30 years ago, and we're starting to see the benefits of that now. And so Iowa is well on their way to having a portfolio that meets the national guidelines in terms of renewable energy, wind and solar. I have solar panels on my home. There are incentive programs in Johnson County to encourage people to do that and to provide those kinds of dollars, again, so that people can afford to put those on their homes and benefit from that. So again, reducing our carbon footprint is really critical, and we have made commitments long ago. What we need to do is continue to have the solar tax credits at the federal and state level. Those are always in jeopardy, and obviously we need to make more of a commitment to do that. But again, we should be proud of what we've done in Iowa in terms of some of those renewable energy sources, and the fact that we've been a model for the country. I think we're second or third in the country in wind energy. And so if you look at that, that's a positive and something that I think we should continue.
So,
Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna agree, Mary, I was gonna say something very similar, but we have given solar tax credits over the last several years, and there is a waiting list every year of people wanting to get these tax credits. Way more people are wanting to do this than we are giving tax credits for. And I think that we should expand that. I think we should continue to expand it. And it's amazing, it actually has bipartisan support. You know, the pork producers have come forward because they use solar panels, you know, on their farms and operations. And so, you know, this is something that has a lot of support. It's something that people want. There's a demand there and a desire there, and so we need to get back to that. We need to expand it. I think wind energy is another thing that, you know, Iowa does really well. Those are all real opportunities for us, and I think the fundamental thing we have to realize is that this is an opportunity. This is a serious economic opportunity, as well as everything else, to really benefit Iowa, to drive, you know, the clean energy jobs and other things. And I also think that we need to work with our farmers to come up with farming solutions that can really help the environment, help to store carbon. You know, we have cover crops, other kinds of no-till practices. You know, there are all kinds of things. Our farmers are very smart, they're creative, they know their business. And I would like to see us work with them, not against them, but with them, to try to figure out, you know, what works for them, give them the incentives, give them the resources they need to actually become part of this solution. Because I think they care too. I think they want to do this, but farmers are getting squeezed on both sides. I mean, I don't know that a lot of people understand the economics of farming, but I'll tell you, it is, our farmers are barely making a living. A lot of them are actually not making a living anymore. They are having to offset losses on their farm with non-farm income from other jobs that they have outside the farms, especially for small and mid-sized farms. That's true. And so, I would like to find ways that we can bring them in and really, help them become part of the solution, because I think that they can do it. I think they want to do it, but they have to have the resources to do it, because right now they really don't.
Well, I serve as the ranking member on Ways and Means in the House, and actually, the solar tax credit hasn't been funded for a couple of years. We're behind in the number that are in the queue, and we have offered it on a bipartisan basis. Actually, almost every Ways and Means committee meeting last session. I know we offered the solar tax credit at least 13 times in committee. I've heard from a number of people, local people, saying the reason I put solar on my house is because we thought the state was coupling with the feds on the solar tax credit. It was a financial decision that we made, and now we're hanging in the queue. If you drive in the country, you see the big no industrial solar signs with next to many rural communities. I understand that. So we see people in those communities having their own fight over solar, and whether it takes away ag land for use for solar. So you see that a bit. Goes back to your question too, as far as climate change. Our starting blocks aren't the same. In the House and the Senate, the starting blocks for what we need to do aren't the same. I usually go by measurements with water quality. As an Iowa fisherman, I love doing the trout streams. I love being up in Clayton County. Now they're talking about mining up there along the trout streams. I like to fish the Cedar River. Would I eat the fish? Hell no. But I look at the water quality issues. I see those signs when you're up at the pond, up at Backbone State Park, when you see it right here at Coralville Res, the signs are up saying, don't swim, or red, don't go in the water. That tells me that the $281 million that we've invested in voluntary water quality per year is not working. And we haven't made we keep hearing we've made incremental steps, but we're not making adequate steps toward just the water quality. And a Republican who's a good friend of mine at the State House will walk up to me every February and go, it's -31. How's your global warming treating you today? And of course I want to say, well, gee whiz, dumbass. Gee whiz, sir. It's because it's the swings. That's what, but what can you do? But it's the starting blocks. And thank you, Mason, for being interested in it. And any ideas that you have. May I ask where you're from?
I live here in Iowa City. I go to college, but I'm from Knoxville.
Knoxville, okay. Home of the races.
Yes.
Hey, can I stay at your parents' house next year for the races?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's impossible to find a place to stay there.
So I think the other thing, at the federal level, Iowa has a really small impact on this. All the wind that's been built in these big industrial solar farms, it's all a result of federal tax policy, federal tax credits. And Warren Buffett, who owns Mid-American Energy, is really smart. And he figured out that he could build all these turbines, and the tax credit would pay 100% of the construction of those turbines. So if you think about $15, $16 billion in federal support from all of us has helped basically put those in the ground. The Build Back Better plan that is yet to become a reality has an enormous amount of effort in it on climate, and it'd probably be the most. We can refund our solar credit here, which we should do, which Republicans cut and defunded, and we've got all these people that thought they were going to get it or not. And they cut funding for the Energy Center, and they cut funding for the Center for Global and Regional Environmental Research, and they cut funding from the Leopold Center. All these green things, Republicans have basically phased out or killed. I think our best hope is talk to Congresswoman Mary Miller Meeks and get her to support climate action in that bill. And Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst. I think those are like today things. We're gonna go back to work in a month, and it'll be at the edges what we do. It's a big deal what they're trying to get done.
Thank
For
you.
anybody.
More questions?
Yeah, okay, okay.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
My name is Savannah. I am a student at the university. I'm also a member of a Panhellenic sorority. And so the assault that happened in the fraternity house really affected our community in a very intense and deep way. I will also say that bystander intervention training is ingrained in our system. I know I had to take it 3 times as a woman going into a sorority, and I know that the fraternities have to take it every single year. As well as having multiple sexual assault educationals every year and every semester. And so bystander intervention training exists and it is being implemented, and it just doesn't seem to be working. And so my question is, do you have any other ideas besides that, as that is what is being implemented and it is not seeming to work, at least at the University of Iowa?
Savannah, I was just gonna say thank you, first of all, and thanks for giving us some of that information about what is currently being done. Do you have an adult in your sorority right now? Okay, because some of them don't, and I think that would help as well, if there was some adult supervision and people there that students could talk to and also have as an ongoing person in the house as opposed to once in a while, and I think that would be important. But I'm more interested in hearing your ideas and what you think would work, because you're right now in the throes of what's going on, and I'm sure your friends and you have talked about that. So what kinds of things do you think would make a difference, and what do you think would affect young men and help with changing a culture? Because obviously we've got a lot of work to do, right? And I don't know if you have other suggestions or ideas or what you've brainstormed about that.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you another perspective, I know that at the University of Iowa, all sororities and fraternities have an advisor, whether that be through their council, so the interfraternity or the Panhellenic Council, or whether that be through nationals. So they do have adults guiding them regularly. I know also in many houses they have an adult living in the house, and they just very conveniently disappear when needed. And so that is an issue. I think something that we've all discussed is more just cracking down on the cases. I mean, because consistently these assaulters are getting let off. The 2 men involved in the case were still students at the University of Iowa at the beginning of this year. And that's a year after they're alleged to have done something incredibly brutal. And I saw the effects of that in my community. I know women in my sorority saw the video that was filmed, and that is insane. And the fact that there was an internal investigation and it's just done, it's insane. And I think there's a lot of things that go on in frat houses that all of us know about. And the university seems to conveniently kick off the ones that don't have prevalent alumni or the ones that aren't raising a lot of money. And that's not okay. I think the only thing that would really work is to make an example and to hold all fraternities to the same caliber. You can't let one fraternity get away with something because Niall Kinnick or John Papa John is their alum.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Are there any more questions or any more responses?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Sierra Wicks. I'm currently the Director of Governmental Relations for the University of Iowa Undergraduate Student Government. And one thing we've worked on in student government for several years has to do with housing and particularly renter protections, because so many of University of Iowa students are renters. one bill, and I know I've been in rooms and talked with you all about this, that we've been working on for a while is the move-in checklist, which helps add a layer of protection for renters as it comes to getting their security deposit back. And I just was a little bit curious to know your thoughts about affordable housing and renting protections across Iowa, but specifically when it deals with college campuses and college towns like Iowa City.
Thanks, Sierra. I'll talk about that first. So I worked with you and John on that bill and worked really hard on it. I really thought we were there. I think I came back with 3 different revisions and versions that I thought maybe would get bipartisan support. And I think there was some bipartisan support for it, but just not enough for them to push it through. I think that there was a lot of resistance on the landlord side. And so we just couldn't get it done. And I know I kind of went back and forth with John. I know John Dickens was in that position. And so, we'll keep working on it. I will say, I think that there are different ways to go about this. And so for the move-in checklist, and so for those of you who don't know, basically the idea is that sometimes it seems like our students are moving into housing and there's no checklist on kind of the condition of the housing when people move in. And so when they move out, sometimes the deposits aren't being returned to students because the landlords are saying that there's damage that's been done or the condition isn't as good, but there's really no proof of that, and the students are saying it was like that when I got there, and there's no way to prove it, right? And so we're working on requiring a checklist at move-in to kind of detail, to kind of like you do with a rental car, you kind of go through and look at what the condition of the car is. So I'll continue to work on that. I'll see if we can get it done. I thought we had a couple of different options that could work, but it just didn't they just didn't move on it. So I do wonder whether it's something that local government might look at. So it could happen more at the city or county level. And then, so that's one thing to think about, whether, maybe we can't get it done across the state, but we might be able to start in some, certain areas. I think especially this is an issue in college towns. So maybe in Iowa City and Ames, Cedar Falls, maybe those are areas that we could, start with that, where it's the most, prominent issue. And the other thing is, I think that it could be something that you might be able to get this done a lot just by education and activism. If students come in and they say, hey, landlord, I'm gonna fill out this checklist right now while you're here with me, and I'm gonna take some photos, and when we're done, I'm gonna make a copy of it, and I'm gonna give that to you, and so we both have it. There it is, and so maybe you don't need a law, right? Maybe if you do it, then it's there, and they can't go back on that. So it could be that through some awareness, and maybe, and I'd be willing to kind of help get some, the word out. But it could be that we can do some of that by just educating people here and, giving them a template checklist to take in with them, encouraging them to take photos with their phones, things like that. I think that we might be able to accomplish 90% of what we're trying to do, by doing that. So just a thought. I'm happy to follow up with you. I know where you are. Thanks.
And then send a copy of that to a good attorney so that they also have a record and the landlord can't conveniently lose it, right? Because that happens too. And obviously we know that students are behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to prove that those problems were there before they moved in and they were never corrected. I know many folks who have had that issue, and students tend to get exploited that way, and we need to work on trying to get that stopped.
And it's kind of sad in our area that students come in and just say, well, I know I'm not gonna get my deposit back. That's what I would say. And as a father who's moved daughters in and out of many apartments during the college years, we do that at the beginning. I think we need at least a baseline law to get this going, to make sure that all landlords participate in the check-in list. And I think it's important that we have students from Knoxville or other areas talk to their legislators from the home district and say, this is what's happening. I know it may not happen in Sac City, but it does happen here at school. Can you at least help us get some of that deposit back? Because we are short on money, and the apartments were in many ways, in better shape than when they moved in. Because I know people that put time and money and effort into their living quarters, so I think we need to keep pushing for this. And one way to do it is back in your hometown. Another way to do it is, look at legislators who have kids in college that have lived in the apartments.
Yeah, this is like a really basic fairness issue, right? Let's just agree, we're moving in, here's the shape of the place. I might bust it up, if I do, I should pay, but there ought to be some record of it. The challenge we face, and renters have a set of rights, people that live in mobile homes have less rights. We've made no progress dealing with, there's been a real push on mobile home rights for folks that live in mobile homes. They got a really strong lobby, they give a bunch of money. You've got the landlord association, they got a strong lobby. Actually, the realtors are lousy too. They don't ever help on any of these things. They've got a big lobby, right? But it's just a fairness thing that we just can't convince Republicans on. And I think Representative Bohannon's idea about just develop, go out and print a checklist form and get it on the web and just do your thing is the best protection you're going to get in the short run, because we're not going to change the law in Des Moines on these issues with the current operation. We have a different issue over here called wage theft. And Christina's the employer, I'm the employee, and we can't pass a bill that says, here's what she's agreed to pay me, $15 an hour, and I'm gonna work 20 hours a week. We can't get a law that requires a piece of paper be generated for that. So that when Christina says, I never agreed to that, I'm only paying you $10 an hour, and you're going, what do you mean? You
How
said.
did I get to be the bad guy in this situation?
But another fairness issue, and it's been estimated that, I'm going off script here, like $500–600 million a year is stolen from low-wage workers because of wage theft. And we've tried for years to get this simple disclosure about, here's the deal we made, here's the deal we made, and you can't get that done either. So that's a fairness issue too, just like the checklist is. And we just have a group in charge that it's not about those kind of fairness issues.
Yeah, so are there any other questions tonight?
Yeah, okay. That's a really good question. Hello, my name is Françoise Gorong, and I'm talking as a volunteer of the ACLU of Iowa. And I want to thank all the House representatives for passing unanimously House File 820, the eviction expungement bill, including Senator Bolcom, for passing the bill out of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee. So, for an update, under current Iowa law, the filing of an eviction notice becomes a permanent public record. This raises a red flag every time a landlord or employer runs a background check, and it is a step toward discrimination, social and economic inequity. Roughly, half of all the eviction filings are dismissed or won by the tenants, yet the tenant is the one who is penalized. Under the current law, an eviction for non-payment of just 1 month's rent jeopardizes a tenant's ability to be accepted for safe, affordable housing in the future. So, in 2021, the Senate did not pass the bill out of committee, but the issue will be eligible to move forward in this legislative session. So Senator Bolcom, can you comment about the future of this bill in the Senate?
I hope that Senator Zahn, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, is willing to take it up. As you point out, the bill is still live for the 2022 session. I haven't talked to him about why it didn't move forward this year, but I will do so when I write back. And this is my first year on Judiciary. I've never served on Judiciary. It's been an interesting time, but it's a good issue, and because it's moved some, hopefully we can get it to the finish
last questions for us tonight? If there are, this will be the last one, I think. All right, well,
You take it, Lauren.
okay.
You could ask that last one.
Okay, so this last question, it might be a little more fun than the rest of them, but because 3 out of the 4 sitting here this will be their last session up in the State House for Senator Holcomb and Representative Masher. They're retiring, they're leaving the State House, and then Representative Bohan will be
On Congress.
maybe up in Congress, so this question is kind of for the 3 of you. Just, what do you think is your greatest impact in your time in the legislature, and what do you hope to accomplish in your last years of next session? And this is all 4 of you, what do you see coming out of the next session? What are your guys' priorities?
How much time do we have?
Yeah, this one might have to be a little bit of a speed round, but
I'll go quickly. 4-year-old preschool. That was one of those issues that we were able to work on, Dave and Joe and I, when we had the majority, and were able to get through legislation to provide that as a voluntary 4-year-old preschool program for all Iowa students who are interested in attending. We needed to expand that. It should be a full-time program, and right now it is only 10 hours a week. If Democrats had stayed in control, I think it would be full-time by now. Unfortunately, once we lost control, we lost our ability to expand on that program. So that would be one of the things that I want to continue to work on and make sure that we keep good child care providers in the state, are able to address the child care deserts that we know about throughout the state of Iowa, and to make that a truly livable profession and career for the men and women who choose to take care of our youngest children.
Well, I've worked with a lot of really talented people, and of course, the legislature, you gotta get 26 and 51, you gotta work with people. I've had a really wonderful experience doing that. I've worked on a lot of issues over the time, tobacco cessation, smoke-free workplaces, tax policy, helping poor people, the preschool issue that Representative Masher mentioned, solar credit. I mean, a lot of really interesting things. I've never really focused on, they told us, I think, to specialize in something. I never did that. We got to work on a whole bunch of different things. Looking ahead, I don't know, I'm trying not to embarrass myself as I go out the door.
Well, so I'll just say, first of all, I would love to give Senator Holcomb and Representative Masher a round of applause. They've been tremendous representatives. Jacoby too, but he's not leaving, so I just, I just want to be clear. But they've been tremendous, representatives, public servants, and just so knowledgeable, given so much of their time, such strong advocates for the people of Iowa City and Johnson County. They've been such role models to me, coming in, and I just can't thank them enough. Really, they've been amazing. And for me, I've only been in a relatively short time. I really, really want to see us, and I hope we do some of this session. I really want to see us get back to our proud tradition of supporting public education in this state at every level, whether that's the 4-year preschool, K through 12, our universities. They really are the crown jewels and the pride of the state, and I really want to see us get back to treating it like that. I think that's so important, and as I said earlier, it helps every person in the state. It helps our economy. It's just central to everything that we do in our state, and I really want to see us get back to that. I'm working on an elder abuse bill that I'm hoping to make some progress on, and so we'll see what happens there. There's a lot of support for it. There's just a few things that we're trying to work out on that to prevent financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse in nursing homes and elsewhere of our elders, and so I've been working a lot on that, and I would just like to make some progress on that. And otherwise, looking for good things and running for Congress, and I hope to represent you in a different way going forward. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, I Thank you guys all for coming.
I don't remember anything about the next.
Oh, I
session.
can't
know
be-
you're not leaving, but-
I can't top these three, I think it's time to go. But I will say thank you, Mary and Joe, for all I've learned from you over the years. I will say these two legislators have represented Johnson County so well, and what they've taught me is two things: to stand firm in your beliefs, but also how you work with other people.
Thank you so much to our panelists, for everyone who asked a question, everyone else who came out tonight. Be safe and stay politically engaged, follow the Daily Iowa maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.